Hello, hello, and a warm welcome to another episode of my musical journey. I'm Stephen Guild, and I'm thrilled that you've joined me. I was very excited to launch the first video in this series last week, and I'm equally enthused to be back for another one. Now, before jumping into the topic I want to address in this video, I'd like to take a moment to answer a question that someone made in a comment on the last video. They wanted to know specifically how I got my vocal training, and I'm very glad to share this information with you all. I largely accredit my initial vocal training and development to my grandparents sending my brothers and me a cassette tape and book called How to Sing Great. This course was put together by an excellent vocal instructor who had a wealth of knowledge on different things that I previously knew nothing about as far as singing and vocal theory. It was from him, for example, that I learned about things like vibrato, falsetto, and yodeling. He also had an abundance of great tips for voice development, and one thing he said that really stuck with me was how important it is to be comfortable when it comes to choosing your singing range so that you don't strain your voice, but that you always go a little higher or a little lower, whatever you need to do to adjust so that you're not straining your voice. At the same time, he also had a lot of different vocal exercises in this course that helped enhance singing range. And I did those exercises quite regularly for a while. And I must say, these exercises and this training in general was what really got the ball rolling as far as my vocal training. Now, all these things I learned from him are areas that I'm still improving in. And also, I am fortunate to have a couple of friends who are vocal instructors, and from time to time, I go to them for their advice and feedback. Also, when I was in Mexico for a while, I hung out with a guy who was a very seasoned singer, and he gave me an abundance of wonderful advice. He taught me specifically how to release my voice through the diaphragm instead of the throat, which really made a difference in my singing and made singing something far more comfortable and pleasant than it ever was before I learned this. But all these things that I learned throughout the years to help develop my voice are things that I'm still perfecting and improving in, which brings me to the main point I want to share in this video. And that is, no matter what skill we are trying to acquire, or maybe it's several skills, but no matter what they are, and no matter how much progress we make, the learning process and the improvement process never stop. There's always room for improvement. The process of growth is continual. This was something I had to learn at varying stages throughout my life as a musician. For example, as a child, I was repeatedly praised on my ability to quickly pick up rhythms and beats, especially when playing percussion instruments. But as I grew older, I realized that it's possible to be very strong and gifted in certain areas of musical skill, yet lacking in others. For example, as I started playing music with more people, a lot of the areas I was lacking in really came forth. And what was difficult was that they were often pointed out to me by others, and it was often difficult to accept and receive their critiquing. Now I'm really grateful for it because I really needed it. For example, during my time in Mexico, I directed a youth singing group, and we played in different restaurants and places where people would normally congregate and gather to listen to music. Now, as the guitar player for this group, I set the pace for the percussionists and the vocals, but my fellow musicians in this group often told me one point, like on a daily basis, I mean, that I would speed up the tempo a lot. And I refused to believe this because I thought myself to be impeccable when it came to timing and tempo. Therefore, whenever my peers expressed this to me, I denied it. Didn't want to believe them. But eventually something happened that made me realize they were right. I was jamming out with somebody outside of this group, a more seasoned musician than me. He was playing bass and I was playing drums. And, we were grooving out, just enjoying ourselves, having a good time. But several times during the session, he stopped the song and told me, "Hey, you're speeding the tempo up, Steve. Slow it down and keep it steady." And I'd think, really? Could that possibly be so? And he said, yeah. So this is what made me realize that what the people in the group I was directing were telling me was correct. And this is how I also came to learn that sometimes a leader has to learn to follow, right? Now, I also went through a similar experience when I launched into recording because while I was using that Fostex machine I mentioned having previously used with my brother, I did not like to use a metronome because I really hated that annoying click, click, click sound constantly playing in my headphones all the time. It seemed like my concentration was distracted by it. But once I started recording with GarageBand and I tuned in more to what I was doing and the quality of, well, the way my recordings were coming out, I realized that my tempo was not solid and consistent. It was up and down, slow and fast. And my brother, who also heard the recordings I was making, agreed with me. So thankfully, before I started posting stuff on YouTube, I realized my need to use a metronome, and I've used one ever since without fail. And I'm very grateful for them. I've come to not mind the click. I mean, it's still not my favorite sound in the world to hear, but I know I need it because it helps me keep time. And another thing that I needed to realize was a necessity was the importance of taking time to adequately mix tracks once they are laid. You see, I think one reason I overlooked the necessity of these things I'm mentioning is because I was really overtaken by my passion and excitement about music. It was really hard for me to see the forest through the trees. Like it was that excitement of being up on stage, playing and performing that caused me to speed up the song. And likewise, it was the excitement of recording multi-tracks that deviated me from realizing the need for adequate mixing. That's why I'm very grateful now to my brother who brought my attention or drew my attention to the need for that. He'd hear my recordings and he'd say things like, you should turn those drums up a bit, or boost the bass, or turn down the piano, stuff like that. Now, accepting the fact that this needed to be done with every song I recorded was a bit tedious because I found mixing to be very tedious. And plus, I didn't think I had a developed ear for it. But the more I did it, in other words, the more I practiced mixing, the more accustomed and acute my ear for it became. And the more I realized the need for it. And now, just as with using the metronome, I realized that adequately mixing a song is absolutely indispensable to its quality and its coming out the best it possibly could. Now, even with vocals, one challenge I still face is learning to keep consistently on key without sliding off on certain parts of the song. Now, I am grateful for one feature of GarageBand called pitch control, which I use now for every song. For the past 2 or 3 songs that I've posted on my channel, I've been using that, and it's made a big difference in the way my vocals have come out, helping them to be far more on key than they previously were. While this is not a tutorial on GarageBand, I will offer, for the benefit of GarageBand users, that I usually, well, let me revise that. So far, I always, after I record a vocal track, while I am mixing the levels of that track, I put the pitch control at 100%, and that gets me the best results. So you can try that. Now, maybe in your case, it'll be a little different. Maybe you won't need it quite at 100%. But in my case, that's what works best. So I thought I'd share that. Oh, another thing about mixing was that I came to realize that recording a song without adequately mixing it, laying down all the tracks without adequately mixing them, yields a similar result to if I were to, say, try to bake a cake or a pie and pour all the ingredients into a pan without properly mixing them, right? So going back to the main point of this video, there's always room for improvement. Learning never stops. So while we should be self-confident enough in the things we do know and have enough self-assurance to move forward, we should not ever get to the point where we think we know so much that we could never improve more. So that brings us to the end of this second episode of my musical journey, and I hope you've enjoyed it. And I also hope that you will leave your comments, or rather leave your questions and insights in the comments on this video, that you'll also put a like on the video, share it on social media, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye now.